What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday to you. I'm Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, coming at you with some fantasy football news, advice, survival pool advice, all kinds of different stuff. And we are getting it courtesy of our show's buddy, the Orange Arrow, a.k.a. Derek Davis. We joked about it before we took the air, Derek. It's almost like, hey, we're coming at you live from the infirmaries here based on the our kids having a little bit of sicky bugs going on there. But at any rate, how you doing,
Yep.
bud? Happy Thursday to you.
Hey, I'm doing great. Just another week of Bengals dominance. So what better to come off than a 41-17 high?
That game was pretty unbelievable in a lot of different respects. And, we also talked about this before we took the air that, what Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are doing at such a young age and in such little professional football experience, they're kind of making things look easy. It's pretty ridiculous. And obviously we talked a lot of Jamar Chase if you joined us on our Wednesday show. And if you didn't join us live, hopefully you've had a chance to download that. But yeah, I've kind of been taking in the sights and sounds from the national media. I was watching actually a little bit when I was doing some other work this morning. I was watching our friends over at 410 Sports Talk who cover the Ravens and their post-game show just to kind of see their take on it. And, they were rightfully disappointed in some things. So it's kind of nice to see the Bengals get some national run from a lot of different networks, but they've got, Derek, a seemingly easy game coming up this week, but those tricky trap games, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely not. I don't think Burrow and the rest of the guys will overlook really any game this season. So I'm really looking forward to this one. Really looking forward to seeing kind of how the fantasy landscape of this game turns out too. It's going to be really interesting to see, with Mike White, does Corey Davis or does any of these guys get involved, or is it more of the running game? How's the running game going to work against the Bengals' fantastic front four that they got going on? I mean, or really front seven as far as the running game goes. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of what transpires between these two teams.
And as we look at a lot of fantasy football individual players in terms of maybe who to be cautious about this week, who to start this week, this game and the Bengals offensive players obviously come into focus. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. We're going to recap how we did on some of our predictions and or pieces of advice from last week. And of course, we're going to go through some fantasy football lineup questions, survival pool questions, and talk about the lines on the game as we usually do. We'll also be taking questions from those of you who are tuning in live. If you have some questions, maybe if it's about the Bengals, we'll maybe take a crack at those, but more so if it's fantasy football related, what you should do with lineups, sits, starts, all that kind of stuff. We want to give you everything to be prepared as the week 8 gets set to kick off tonight on Thursday night. Before we do, I want to share with the folks your YouTube channel, Derek, as well as, so if you can tell us a little bit about what you do there, I'll put the link to it in our live chats so folks can subscribe to that. And so tell us a little bit about that, as well as the Fantasy Football League you have commissioned the past couple of years and what the proceeds are going to and everything with that.
Yeah, so with my fantasy football show, it's a Bengals centered fantasy show. So I will do a lot of kind of Bengals related news as far as the fantasy value goes, and I also do my starts and sits. I do players to pick up. Excuse me, sorry. I do players to pick up. I talk about the highest score of the week in the charity fantasy league and the basement dweller, which Anthony, unfortunately, you were in the limelight of that last week. But I know you had a lot of injuries and bye weeks that you had to deal with, and we talked about just possibly taking the L on the week and moving on. But I do a lot of that on Wednesdays, and then on Fridays I do the more the betting lines and stuff like that.
Well, we put the link in the live chats for those who are tuning in live. So after you subscribe to our channel, the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast on YouTube, go and subscribe to Derek's channel as well. And I appreciate you creating that, even though I am in the cellar of it. I appreciate you creating that league and creating some opportunity for funds to be raised for the Joe Burrow Hunger Relief Fund. Really cool idea that you came up with. And oh, by the way, I still have, I almost rocked it yesterday. I still have your Bengal Cares shirt that you sent me last year. So I might be rocking that one again to sometime this week. I saw that and I'm like, hey, I gotta bust that thing back out. But at any rate, thanks for spearheading that. And like I said, go subscribe to Derek's YouTube channel. The link is there. I'm sharing the screen of his channel on YouTube. Of course, you can subscribe to our channel as well. Our logo, there's a little icon at the bottom of the screen there under Derek. You can click that to subscribe and then get notified when we go live and when new content is available. And all of our stuff is on all of the major audio platforms as well. Enough shameful self-promotion, at least for our show. Derek, tell us how we did last week in some of our some of the areas in terms of plays, games in which to bet on, all that kind of stuff. If you can recap on some of the advice, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So last week we actually did really well. We talked about Tua Tagovailoa being a start of the week. We talked about CJ Uzama again being a start of the week. Both of those guys in their respective positions finished as QB1 and tight end 1 on the week.
Yeah.
So if you pick those guys up and streamed them this week, you ended up doing pretty well. And then a couple other guys, I said Tyler Lockett and Mark Andrews as the possible sits of the week. Those guys didn't do very well either. So both of our starts and sits of the week last week actually hit very well. So if you took our advice, you came out on the plus side.
Interesting stuff, because I had pegged, I guess maybe again it's me being this longtime Bengals watcher, fan, follower, covering the team. Just I've seen how often tight ends have torched the Bengals defense. And Andrews is a great one. I mean, he's up there right now playing at the level of the Kittles and Kelseys and whatnot in a lot of ways. And that was kind of a, for lack of a better word, pretty ballsy call there by you last week, by saying to sit him. And initially, and this kind of credits, if we want to talk a tiny bit of Bengals analysis, this kind of credits Lou Anarumo and the Bengals making some potential second
halftime adjustments. That is it 100%.
Yeah, Andrews had a couple of decent plays early in that game, and then all of a sudden, second half, it was like he was a non-factor. So
my wife Sarah got mad at me because that first half I was constantly yelling at the TV. She's like, "Derek, what are you doing? They can't hear you." And it seemed like every single play, Mark Andrews right smack dab in the middle of the field, wide open with nobody around him. And I was like, they've got to figure something out. And credit to Lou, they went in, they talked about it, they came back out after the half, and it was like, did he get a catch after the half? If I'm remembering correctly, I don't think he did.
I can't remember if he had a catch in the second half, but basically what had happened, it would seem as if the Bengals kind of clamped down on Andrews as they came out of halftime. Obviously, the Ravens made a little bit of adjustment there by going deep to Hollywood Brown there for the touchdown, but the rest of the way was kind of just blah for the Ravens offense. And then both teams ended up sitting their respective starters as the game got out of control for Baltimore and completely in control for Cincinnati. So at any rate, that was a ballsy call by you in terms of Mark Andrews and the CJ Uzama call there. We're going to get to a couple more. I'm seeing some questions roll through in our live chats. Keep those coming. We're going to get to some of those in just a little bit here. If you've got some fantasy football questions, maybe a Bengals question or two, we'll take a crack at those. But Derek, what about the actual games? You mentioned some of the players there. What about some of the games in terms of lines, survival pool picks, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So again, if you tuned into my live stream on Friday, you made money because I actually talked about all four of my betting picks were hits this week. I talked about the Bengals +6, and I said if you wanted to, you could take the money line. I was a little bit hesitant on that because I knew, Baltimore. I suspected Baltimore would be a tough team to play, but I knew that this team would at least keep it close. And I even said that, if you think that, like I do, that the Bengals could potentially win this game, to go in there and bet the Bengals to make the playoffs, because at that point in time it was plus 150. I'd say after beating Baltimore, if you went in there and checked it out now, it would be minus money. So you'd be having to pay more than you would get back. So the Bengals +6, the Raiders -3, the Bengals to score over 20, and the Ravens to score under 27 was my betting locks of the week last week. So very good week last week, and I made quite a bit of money.
Well, I hope you made somewhere in the neighborhood of Dave Portnoy, the president of Barstool Sports.
Yeah,
Dude
no, I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't that daring on the Bengals, but man, you gotta give credit to the guy putting his
dude,
money where his mouth is. That's for sure.
that's right. Dude put down about $250,000 on the Bengals, I think, just to cover, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then he won an additional, aside from winning his bet money back, he won like an additional $250,000. So he's sitting on over 500K on the afternoon there, with half of that being pure profit. So he's a pretty happy fella, is Dave Portnoy. So I guess good for him, especially since he bet on the Bengals. We got to be proud of that, I suppose.
Doing the gritty and loving life.
That's right. Pretty ugly version of the gritty, but I don't know that I could do one any better.
Yeah.
Strawberry Ice saying, "Hey, I'm doing better in our league." He's got to talk a little trash. Old Jeff Trenopole, good to see him, regardless of rubbing it in my face a little bit in terms of where we're at with that league. Any others? Any other recap points that you want to get to before we kind of move into maybe some lineup questions and whatnot?
Not really. I know I had mentioned some possible pickups being the Cleveland running backs and maybe JD McKissick or guys like that. But I do want to address something I said on my show yesterday. JaMycal Hasty as the Cleveland running back. It is not JaMycal Hasty. It is in fact Dearness Johnson. So I will correct myself on your show about a mistake that I made on my show.
Is Hasty's the one? Is he the backup on the 49ers? Is he one of the?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Elijah, I think it's who is it? Elijah
Mitchell. Yeah.
Mitchell. Yeah, I said Elijah Moore, but I knew that wasn't right. Yeah, he's stepping up for San Francisco, but that game all of a sudden seems a bit more winnable for the Cincinnati Bengals, as does the Kansas City Chiefs game. The Chargers game will be tough, but they've had some moments of vulnerability. The Raiders game is suddenly seeming like it's a pretty marquee matchup. So a lot of really interesting and good games, especially as it pertains to the AFC playoff picture coming up here. And of course, the Bengals sit atop the AFC conference as we speak with a 5-2 record and beating the Baltimore Ravens. Gotta just relish in that one a little bit.
Absolutely.
Let's talk lineups. I guess since we've already been making fun of old Anthony's lineups and letting everybody know that I'm dwelling in the cellar, let's go to, and this is through the Sleeper app. This is my matchup this week. I do, for some reason, have a 62% chance of winning. I am 1-6 in this league. I think, though, that and don't tell whoever Hot Commodity is. Don't tell them that I think they've got a couple of maybe injured players in there. But this is what I've got here. In case you are not watching the actual video of it, these are some of the play. I've got Prescott in there. He is questionable, but I think most people think he's going to play as of Sunday night against Minnesota. Fournette in there. Miles Sanders questionable. It looks like he may not go, so I may have to make a move there. I've got Justin Jefferson. Claypool, another questionable guy, but seems like he's going to play. Robbie Anderson, a guy who's been real hit and miss this year, particularly as the Carolina Panthers have been up and down big time. Travis Kelce, I've got him in there for the Monday Nighter. Henderson from the Rams is in there. Josh Allen is kind of that wide receiver, tight end, running back flex, quarterback flex position that is in our league. Josh Myers is the kicker, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense in there. Here are my bench guys. Obviously not going to play Josh Jacobs with the bye week, but Johnson from Houston in there. Galladay, again, that's kind of been a mixed bag there. I don't think I would play Washington. He's kind of fallen down the pecking order a bit in the Pittsburgh Steelers receiving order. And then, of course, Gesicki. So I don't know if you see anybody on my bench that's kind of blowing your hair back there, if I should kind of stick with what I've got here, despite the Miles Sanders question mark.
Yeah, so the first thing I noticed was did you pick up David Johnson today, or did you draft him, or
I've had him.
Okay, because that one is really intriguing, especially with Mark Ingram out of the picture now as he goes to New Orleans. So and he had a very good week last week. I think he scored like 10 PPR points in fantasy leagues, and that was only on like 50 to 54% of snaps. So I can't remember exactly the snap share. I guess I could click on him and notice or know for sure. But yeah, 54% of snaps. He had 7 rushing attempts for 25 yards. You know, he's not going to get a whole lot in the ground game, but maybe with Mark Ingram being out of the lineup, he could in fact get more touches there. But he's been more or less their pass catching back. So if Houston's down, which it seemingly they're always down, he could get a lot more in the passing game.
Correct me if I'm wrong as well. I think Ingram was kind of eating up a lot of touches and not really getting a lot of yards per carry, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's actually that trade that's a great point there. So I'm probably going to be swapping him out for Miles Sanders there based on the projected points. So good stuff there. I don't want to give my opponent, whoever he or she may be, advice, but is there anything they've got? Rodgers, DeAndre Swift, who has basically been questionable the entire year, it seems. You've got Chuba Hubbard there, Amari Cooper, Jones on Tennessee, DJ Moore from Carolina. They've got Uzama in there, Damian Williams of Kansas City, Daniel Jones is the flex quarterback, Zerline and Tampa Bay defense, and on the bench they've got Connor from the Cardinals, who goes up against Green Bay's defense, Saquon Barkley, who has been nursing another injury, Williams with Denver, and AJ Green and Mark Andrews on the bye there. So anything for my opponent is, look at how gracious of a fantasy football player I am. I am allowing you to give an opponent some fantasy football advice should there be something that you see they should do. And I figure that lineup is probably similar to someone listening at this program right now. So
really, I mean, the lineup he has right now is about the best I think he could possibly have set up. Now, if Saquon Barkley's out there, maybe you throw him in, but I would wait to see, what's going to happen as far as our snap percentages.
Basically, what he was saying there was if you heard him talk about Saquon Barkley and him coming back in and monitor that injury situation this week, and that is maybe something that you will want to make a move on in terms of your fantasy football lineup and what to do there. I'm seeing some other. We're gonna bring Derek back in just a second here, but I'm seeing some questions. We're gonna get to those in just a second. If you have more, please feel free to send those in the live chat. The other questions that are coming up here are obviously with the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Jets. They are struggling, and what do you make of the Bengals? Is this going to be some form of an offensive breakout type of game for Cincinnati with maybe not with the usual suspects of Burrow and Chase, but maybe with guys like Tyler Boyd and guys like T. Higgins, who have had a couple of nice games and or moments this year, but haven't been the absolute breakout guys. Tyler Boyd had the 100-yard game earlier this year. Higgins has been in the end zone a couple of times, but I think for most folks, while it's been the Jamar Chase show, I think most people have kind of felt that this may be a good week to get a T. Higgins game going here, and obviously see what the Bengals can do on offense outside of Chase, outside of Mixon. This also seems like a big Joe Mixon afternoon as well, and coming up for the Bengals. Maybe just kind of ground and pound a little bit, particularly if they control the game. I don't know if we have Derek back or not, so we'll keep working on that there. I think we maybe have him back. Let's see, Derek, do we have you back now?
Can you hear me now? Is it better now, or?
It's better. Yeah, it's better. I appreciate you being mobile. It looks like you moved a little bit of a different location. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Sorry we're losing you there. It was kind of cutting in and out, but I just was recapping the fact that you had said maybe Saquon for the other. The audio cut out at the perfect time because you were giving my opponent advice, and it was like, hey, it cut out perfectly. I love it.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of recapping that you said maybe potentially Saquon would be really the only thing that my opponent should be monitoring this week as as they maybe tweak their lineup. I was talking and I was kind of prefacing this. Let's get to kind of some sits and starts aside from the league that I shared. And with that, I was talking about the Bengals and their offensive weapons, namely T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, with the going up against the Jets and the potential for a big game for them. No more Jamal Adams, and the Jets are just struggling, just one win on the year. And not only, they've got some pieces on defense, but it's not only just a lack of overall, maybe secondary talent, etc., but it's the potential that their defense is going to continuously be put on the field with Mike White starting for the Jets in lieu of Zach Wilson. So it could be just it could be an effect of a lot of snaps by this team, by their defense on the field here. So what do you think? And we've got a question relating to this from our live chat, and we'll get to that in just a second. What do you think about Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins this week? Or is it going to continue to be the Jamar Chase and maybe even the CJ Uzama show this week?
Yeah. So the first thing really is I look for Joe to not Mixon, but Joe Burrow to get his he's averaging 2.3 touchdowns a week or something like that. I look for him to continue that streak this week.
Okay, so you've got T. Higgins, you've got Tyler Boyd there, and there may be kind of a breakout game for those two. I mentioned that there could be some. Yeah, I don't want to say that they haven't had an effect this year. They've had some big plays. They've had Higgins has been in the end zone, and Boyd has had a 100-yard game and whatnot. But it has definitely been the Jamar Chase show. The question that would go along with this I love the optimism here. This is from Mark Fry. If the Bengals get in the habit of putting opponents away early and sitting starters in the fourth quarter, will that affect players' fantasy value? I don't foresee personally a bunch of the blowouts like we saw last week against Baltimore, the week prior with Detroit. I think it's easy to say, now you've got the Jets coming up, a team that they should handle very well, and the opportunity could happen this week. But there are other games down the road that seem to be a lot tougher. So I don't think this is going to be an absolute week-to-week thing, but I don't know your take on that, Derek. Is it kind of owner beware with the Bengals in some situations, which is odd enough to be in that position as a Bengals fan, but is it kind of just
Right,
owner
right.
beware with some of these guys because of, hey, they may be sitting for half a quarter, a full quarter, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the way I look at this, and last year I made that mistake in a game. I don't know if you remember Tom Brady's like 4 or 5 touchdown half that he had last year, but I was a little worried of that same thing for Tom Brady because of the talent discrepancy on the game that they played last year, and I actually benched Tom Brady in a league and played over someone else, and the whole thing is the guy or your team has to get there somehow, right? So if they are sitting, there's the potential of they just went off for 3 quarters and got their fantasy value in 3 quarters as opposed to 4 quarters, and then that's how the game turned out. So the way I look at this is I look at it kind of as a positive because with running backs being so injured and unhealthy right now, this kind of gives you that opportunity to where if you were kind of injured at running back and you needed a guy to possibly pick up and stream this week, maybe you pick up a Samaje Perine, or maybe you pick up a Chris Evans and possibly start them because maybe Joe Mixon sits out the whole fourth quarter and they get, I don't know, 14, 15 carries or 15 touches in that fourth quarter, just trying to run the clock out.
Okay. Well, it was a good question there by Mark, I feel like. And obviously
Yeah,
it's kind of,
very.
yeah, it's a fun position to be in as a Bengals fan in terms of, seeing this, seeing some of these dominating performances. And ironically, the last two dominating, actually the three most dominating performances by the Bengals in their 5 wins have all been on the road. They beat
Mm-hmm.
the Pittsburgh Steelers by 14 points. They beat the Lions by a number. I can't remember the score offhand right now, and then obviously you had the 41-17 win this week. 38 points combined that they beat the Ravens and the Steelers in their respective stadiums. That's a big deal. And then so I can see where this is something that is, not only it's just a point of confidence for this team and the fan base right now with how the Bengals are doing. This isn't really, this is a question from William Newell. This isn't really truly a fantasy question, but I can see how it can pertain to it in terms of those who may be having and playing the Bengals defense as a fantasy football league option. Is Trey Waynes out for the year or just on IR again? My understanding is that he is on IR. They could designate him to return with the new things with COVID and some flexibility on both IR list and practice squad stuff. There's a little more flexibility there. I at this point, though, I'm not really ready to. I'm not really ready to have him be back at any point, especially in the near future. I can't count on it. And this also plays a little bit into the last question from Mark Fry, where if the Bengals get these big leads, is now the Bengals defense as a fantasy option. It's kind of a double-edged sword because they may not allow a lot of points early on, but then in garbage time, there could be a lot of yards and points and stuff like that in some of these contests. I don't know if you have thoughts or feelings on that, but it's kind of weird
Yeah,
how that works out.
the dreaded garbage time. Blake was Blake Bortles was the king of garbage time stats, and that's one thing that you kind of got to worry about. But the way the fantasy defenses work, you're going to get the majority of your points as far or through sacks and interceptions and
The
pick
big play.
sixes, that kind of stuff. So that's how you're going to get the majority of your fantasy points. Yes, you want to hold them to the smallest score possible, but I normally, right when you start the game off, your fantasy points for your defense is like 15 points, and you get all excited, and then as the game goes on, it subtracts, goes further and further away. But I just kind of look at that and just block that out of my mind and just say, okay, they're starting with 0 points. Let's see how many sacks this team can get or how many picks this team can get, and that's kind of where I tend to focus on.
Good stuff there. Talking with Derek Davis, a.k.a. the Orange Arrow. We're going to get to some other starts and sits as well as some lines and other types of things before we start closing things up here. Joining you on a Thursday afternoon, talking some fantasy football, survival football, etc. And we're also talking to you about one of the companies in which we partner with, Symbol, SIMBULL.app/OBI. If you listen to this program really over the past handful of months, you will have known about Symbol, but a recent development in the partnership comes with the promotion. They've given at various times our listeners varying promotions, all of which are very exciting promotions. This one also is very, very exciting, where they protect up to a $500 deposit for 90 days in there. So if you go in there where you drop some money into an account because you want to invest in teams like they are stocks, which is what Symbol is about, if you put in up to $500, they will cover that within a 90-day window. Should you lose money, should you be dissatisfied with the product, etc. So really, it's nothing to lose in some ways within that 90-day window. And you can make money off of teams you're either passionate about, teams you see opportunities with. I know Derek had, I think, invested early on in the Bengals, and hopefully he has made some money there when we first partnered with them based on what the Bengals were at per share when we first partnered with them. And now I haven't looked recently, but I'm sure they are up there based on what's going on this year with them. So opportunity to make money on teams that you are passionate about and or ones you see that there are opportunities with. It's not just the NFL. They've got other sports and a lot of teams available. So if you like playing the actual stock market, if you like playing fantasy football, which I assume you do because you're listening to this program, if you like playing survival football, all of that, you got to check out Symbol, SIMBULL.app/OBI. Use the promo code OBI, of course, for Orange and Black Insider, and you can take advantage of that $500 deposit protection within the first 90 days of signing up and submitting that deposit. So go check out Symbol. Well, we talked about the Bengals players and their on offense as some of the guys that could have a big opportunity to help out owners this week. Let's talk about another guy, and this is maybe a selfish question I have on my part. Jerry Jeudy, a guy I had hung on to on one of my teams for a while now because he was on short-term IR, is now finally back after that ankle injury. The Broncos haven't really been the same since he has left the team. Cortland Sutton's really, a good player, but they are missing Jerry Jeudy in that offense for sure. Is this kind of a week where you expect an explosion from Jeudy, or is this a week where you feel like he's kind of maybe going to slowly ramp back up and then become kind of the guy that we saw before the injury?
Yeah, so actually, I have him ranked around wide receiver 30 and around there, so flex play. The great thing about it is that it's almost as if he's going to seemingly take over that slot role in the Broncos offense, and that is a great spot to be in with a quarterback like a Teddy Bridgewater, because Teddy Bridgewater is not the kind of guy who likes to throw the ball deep or extend the field, so to speak. So he looks to keep that short and intermediate targets, and I see Jeudy as being a guy who could potentially get 8, 9 targets this week and get 6, 7 catches for 60 or 70 yards and a touchdown. So it's weird to say, but even coming off the injury, I am 100% fine with throwing him in your flex and starting him this week.
Interesting. I think I did that. So I'll have to check another league that I have him in, but I hung on to him with the hope that he was going to come back and do some good things for my team there. So we'll see. Any other kind of gems? Again, we want people to go to your channel and check out your videos in terms of play. So we don't want to give up the whole farm here, but any others besides those selfish questions that I asked about between the Bengals players and Jerry Jeudy? Any other players that you maybe want to stick out there for our listeners?
Yeah, so one guy I possibly talked about starting this week was Carson Wentz. Right now he's QB 14 and in I think in 6 point per passing touchdown leagues, and I see him having a potentially solid. I won't say a good week, but a solid week. If I remember correctly, I think every week except for like one or two, he's had a 20 to 21 to 22 point fantasy week. So he's solid every single week. Um, and I look for him to continue that against Tennessee this week.
Okay. Okay. I
And
like
then
that.
a sit of the week. I'll tell you one guy I said was Mike Gesicki, and that has not worked out for me too well. But like I said, what I like to do is I look at guys in the top 24, or as far as tight ends go, guys in the top 12, and look and see who could potentially not have a very good week. And the reason why I said Mike Gesicki this week is because he is going up against Buffalo's defense, who is very, very good against tight ends this year. And I just look at this game now. Gesicki is playing the majority of his snaps in the slot, so I don't know how that will pan out for. Let's just say don't sit him, but temper your expectations on Mike Gesicki.
Okay. Let's move into some survival picks. I'm gonna talk about my survival league. So here's who I have picked so far and cannot pick going forward: San Francisco, Green Bay, Las Vegas, Cincinnati, Baltimore, the Rams, and the Buccaneers. I am still alive right now, to quote Pearl Jam. Uh, I look, I have the Cardinals, but they are hosting the Packers, so I'm not overly confident in that one. There's a matchup between Carolina and Atlanta. I could pick either one of those two teams. The one that is sticking out the most to me is I have the Bills in Buffalo hosting Miami. That so I have that. There is still the Tennessee and Indianapolis game. Tennessee is at Indianapolis. Maybe Tennessee in that one. So there are others that I can pick. There's the Chargers and Patriots game, Seahawks and Jaguars, Broncos and Washington, Cowboys and Minnesota. So I mean, I don't think I have not taken the Chiefs as well. So Monday night at
There it
Kansas
is. There it
City.
is. I was waiting for you to call that
Yeah,
one.
I have not taken the Chiefs yet. So hosting New York, Kansas City's been quite a disappointment. So I don't know if that's also one where you go with. I think Buffalo in Buffalo and Kansas City in Kansas City seem to be the safest ones for me this week. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so I ultimately went with Kansas City, just because of the fact that number one, I that defense is really scaring me, and Kansas City used to be the lock and loaded. Hey, if you need this team in a pinch, throw Kansas City in there because they're going to get the dub pretty easily. So this year they haven't been that, and it's almost as if you need to kind of pick and choose your moments with Kansas City. And I feel like coming off that loss they had, and the kind of the way they've been, they did they lose last week? I feel like they did.
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah.
Yeah, so I see that. Yeah, they did because I remember. Anyway, TikTok, Jackson Mahomes, all that stuff. That was a bad look on their part. But anyway, I feel like I don't see them losing 2 games in a row. The Buffalo one I do like as well, but an in division game against Miami. If I remember correctly, looking back, even the bad Miami teams, you normally are able to sneak about one to two division wins a year out. So that one kind of scares me a little bit. So I wanted to say I'd like to stay away from in division games if I can help it as much as possible, but just because of the uncertainty that lies within teams that know each other very well.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on that one. Let's start closing things up with some lines here in terms of week 8 odds. This is courtesy of thelines.com. We are not sponsored or partnering with them. We just like to use them on this show because they have DraftKings, Caesars, FanDuel, BetMGM, Unibet, I mean, they've got a number of different sources to show you the points and odds in this one. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but we can kind of look at some of the marquee games here. Packers and Cardinals. The fact that there is a discrepancy there, in Green Bay looks like they are a 6-point underdog in Arizona. That's really interesting because Green Bay is what, 5-1 or 6-1 at this point in time, and Arizona is undefeated. So 6 points. That would mean that Arizona essentially would be favored by 3 in Green Bay in this one. So that's really interesting. Obviously, Carolina, Atlanta, 3 points. That's just basically a coin flip game. So I would maybe stay away from that one. So then you look at Miami and Buffalo. Buffalo being a 13.5 point favorite. The Bengals 10.5 points. That started at about 8 or 8.5, I think. So that has risen. The Rams, the big discrepancy there, 14.5 over Houston. I don't know. And then you see the one on Monday night that we were just talking about, 9.5 or 10, depending on which source you have there for Kansas City. What are you thinking for this week in terms of point spreads, favorites, etc.?
Yeah, so actually one of the bets that I like really well, and if you wanted, you could probably wait up until game time tonight to get that one and see if you could potentially get your best value. This line jumped way up whenever Devontae Adams went on COVID IR and or COVID, whatever they want to call that. And it's crazy how much Vegas tends to think that a wide receiver will cause that much of a discrepancy. But like you said, I want to say they were like +4 or +3.5 or something like that at the beginning of the week. Tampa Bay -5 was another one I like.
Okay. Good to know. That's Tampa Bay going into New Orleans on that one. So that's an interesting one. And like I said, a lot of these others are 2.5. Cowboys going into Minnesota, Washington, Denver. That's a coin flip. Jacksonville, Seattle is all of a sudden a coin flip. You would never have thought that going into the season. Patriots are 5-point underdogs in LA against the Chargers. So those are some other ones to keep an eye on there. Derek, one more time, if you wouldn't mind, tell us when your show goes live and what you're doing on your YouTube channel and how our listeners can find you there.
Yeah, so I go live every Wednesday and Friday. Like I said on my show last week, the times are going to be a little fluid because of me going back to night shift in my work, and so instead of being every day, I was going live at 6:30 roughly on Wednesdays and Fridays. Now look for it to be kind of like this one, like a little lunchtime live, if that's what you want to call it, or something like that.
I
But
like it.
every Wednesday, every Fridays I do betting advice and stuff like that. I like to call it betting advice. It's a labor of love for sure, but it's definitely a lot of fun also.
Well, thanks for what you do. Thanks for your time and knowledge that you dropped in here. Hopefully, whatever weather is coming your way, that's glitching you a little bit. Hopefully, it's not anything too severe. Hopefully, it's not too severe there.
Rob Duncan.
What's that?
Sorry, Rob Duncan had a comment in here. He said it's the Feds. They know he's dropping too much knowledge.
Yeah, that's it. Well, thanks for dropping that knowledge on us here on the Week 8 Fantasy Football Show on the Orange and Black Insider. We are not the experts. The Orange Arrow and Derek Davis is, and you got to go to his channel and check out all of the advice he gives multiple times a week on his show. So go check it out. And of course, you can check out the multiple stuff we put out on this show on the Orange and Black Insider, whether it's our post-game show to kind of kick off the week, whether it's Happening Headlines, which goes through all the Bengals and NFL headlines, our Wednesday night show with John Sheeran and myself, this show with Derek Davis and myself, and of course, Listener Questions Live that we do multiple times a month as well. So all of that is on the Orange and Black Insider, whether that's on the YouTube channel or our your favorite audio platform, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and of course, We are part of the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, which includes Matt Minnick's Coach Speak and Chalk Talk, as well as Ace and Zim's show, Orange is the New Black. So go check out all that stuff. Follow Cincy Jungle across all social media platforms as well, and keep it to cincyjungle.com for all your news, opinions, analysis, fantasy football advice. Everything is in one spot for you at Cincy Jungle. Thanks, Derek. Have a good week. Let's hope the Bengals just cruise through Halloween with a nice win against the Jets, as it should be.
Absolutely. I am looking forward to it. Yeah, guys.
Take it easy.
You too.